The morning
You're
sun crept
done!
over Coronado
Not
Naval
today!
Base like it had every
Take her
morning
down!
for the past
Bring
60
it
years.
on!
Salt air mixed with diesel fuel. The Pacific Ocean hammered the coastline with the same relentless rhythm it had maintained since before humans learned to build ships. But this morning, something different moved through the base. Something that would shatter 15 years of carefully constructed authority in less than 3 hours. Master Sergeant Victor Kane stood at the edge of Training Yard 7, steam rising from his coffee cup into the California dawn. 42 years old. 15 years as a SEAL instructor. A face carved from granite and disappointment. He watched his domain with the satisfaction of a man who had never been challenged, never been questioned, never been wrong. 282 Navy SEALs stood in perfect formations across the yard. The most elite warriors in the United States military. Men who operated in the spaces between official action and political deniability. Men who went where others couldn't, did what others wouldn't, and came home without discussing what happened. Kane had helped shape many of them. He intended to keep shaping them until the day he retired, or died, whichever came first. That was when he saw her. At first, his brain didn't process what his eyes were showing him. A woman? Near the formation line, not in uniform, not carrying visitor credentials, not accompanied by any escort, just standing there. Dark auburn hair pulled back in what looked like a tactical bun. Black workout clothes that could have been civilian athletic wear. Maybe 5'5", athletic build. Moving with a looseness that suggested either complete ignorance of where she was or complete confidence that she belonged there. Kane's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Senior Chief Marcus Brennan drifted up beside him following his gaze. 16 years in the teams. Loyal to Kane like a hunting dog to its master. You seeing what I'm seeing, Vic? Some lost civilian, probably looking for her husband. Husband's probably going to be pissed she wandered into the wrong playground. Kane handed Brennan his coffee and started walking. His stride was purposeful, his shoulders squared, his expression shifting into the mask of authority he'd perfected over 15 years of making people feel exactly how unwelcome they were. The SEALs in formation noticed his movement, then they noticed what he was moving toward. Conversations died mid-sentence. Attention shifted like iron filings to a magnet. 282 pairs of eyes tracked the developing situation with predatory awareness. Entertainment was scarce at 0700 on a Tuesday. The woman didn't turn as Kane approached. She was studying the formation with an expression he couldn't quite read. Her eyes swept left to right, then back again, pausing on individual SEALs with focused assessment that made him uncomfortable in ways he didn't want to examine. Well, 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 his voice carried across the morning air like a blade. Looks like someone's girlfriend wandered onto the wrong playground. She still didn't turn. Hey, I'm talking to you, sweetheart. Now she turned, slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world and his authority meant absolutely nothing to her. Dark eyes met his without flinching. Kane felt something shift in his chest, something that might have been warning if he'd been smart enough to recognize it. This is a restricted training facility. He continued, volume rising to ensure maximum audience. The gift shop is back that way, unless you're here to deliver someone's lunch. Scattered laughter rippled through the formation. Someone wolf whistled. Another voice called out, "Easy on her, Chief. She might cry." More laughter. The woman's expression didn't change. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Master Sergeant." The laughter stopped like someone had cut a wire. Kane felt his jaw tighten. The way she said his rank. Not deferential, not nervous, like she was confirming something she already knew, rather than responding to his authority. Is that so? That's so. And where exactly is that Naval Special Warfare Command, Training Facility Alpha, evaluating operational readiness and personnel conduct? She paused. So far, I'm not impressed. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes explosions. Brennan moved up beside Kane, sensing the situation escalating beyond simple civilian removal. Ma'am, you're going to need to show us some identification and authorization. Are you familiar with Regulation 723, Senior Chief? Brennan blinked. Regulation what? 723, the one governing external evaluation protocols. The regulation she cited was real. It was also classified at levels that most SEALs didn't know existed. How do you know about 723? Because I helped write the update last fiscal year. The claim hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Civilians didn't write military regulations. Contractors sometimes provided input, but the phrasing she used suggested direct authorship. Direct authorship required security clearances that most admirals didn't possess. Kane's face had shifted from condescension to something darker. Something that looked a lot like threatened territory. I don't know what game you're playing, sweetheart, but it ends now. You're either going to produce valid credentials or you're going to be escorted off this base in handcuffs. I have credentials. Then show them. You don't have need-to-know clearance. Someone in the formation inhaled sharply. In 15 years, Kane had never been spoken to like this. Not by officers, not by civilians, not by anyone who wanted to keep walking without assistance. You think this is funny? I think this is exactly what I came to evaluate. And what's that? How your leadership responds to unexpected situations. How authority handles challenges, whether professionalism or ego drives decision-making. She tilted her head slightly. The results so far are concerning. Across the training yard in the elevated command observation post, Major Diane Hartwell lowered her binoculars with a frown that creased her 44-year-old face. 22 years of naval service. Commanded men in combat zones from the Gulf to the Horn of Africa. Made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. But she had never seen anything quite like this. She lifted her radio. Run a background check. Female approximately mid-20s, dark auburn hair. Athletic build, currently engaging Master Sergeant Kane near Formation 7. Ma'am, that'll take time without more specific identifiers. Then start now. Copy. Hartwell kept the binoculars trained on the scene below. The woman's posture bothered her. Not because it was wrong. Because it was right. The way she stood. Weight balanced, never fully open to potential threat. Eyes constantly tracking peripheral movement while maintaining focus on the primary target. That wasn't civilian body language. That was operator body language. Down in Formation 7. Sergeant Tyler Westbrook stood at attention with SEAL Team 4, trying to control the tremor that had started in his hands the moment the woman turned around. He knew that face. God help him, he knew that face. Grozny. 18 months ago. The operation that officially never happened. His team had been conducting urban reconnaissance when everything went sideways. Ambush. RPGs turning their vehicles into funeral pyres. Half his squad dead in the first 30 seconds. Westbrook remembered the chaos. The screaming. The absolute certainty that he was going to die in a Russian city for a mission that would be officially denied. And then she had appeared. Moving through the carnage like death itself had taken human form. Pulling survivors from wreckage while rounds snapped overhead. Calling in air support that wasn't supposed to exist for an operation that wasn't supposed to be happening. Staying calm while the world exploded around her. He still didn't know her name. The operation had been so compartmentalized that different elements never crossed paths again. But he remembered her face. He remembered her voice. He remembered thinking that if angels existed, they didn't carry harps. They carried suppressed weapons and spoke with the quiet authority of people who had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. You good West. The whisper came from Petty Officer Garrett beside him. Fine. The lie tasted like copper. If she was here, something had either gone very right or catastrophically wrong with operational security. Either way, watching Kane try to intimidate her was like watching a house cat threaten a Bengal tiger. Someone was about to learn something painful. At 0712, The communications array went down. One moment, tactical frequencies were crystal clear. The next, static drowned everything like electronic white noise. Radios squawked, useless feedback. The training coordination network collapsed into chaos. "We've got a comms failure," Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez announced, jogging toward the command post. "Primary array is down. Backup showing intermittent connectivity at best." Hartwell felt her stomach drop. Communication failures during training exercises created cascading problems. Specialists would need to be called in. Schedules would collapse. Accountability reports would need to be filed. Her career didn't need this today. The woman moved toward the communications equipment before anyone could stop her. "Ma'am, step away from that equipment," Rodriguez barked. She ignored him. Her hands were already moving across control panels with the kind of familiarity that suggested muscle memory rather than improvisation. "Frequency interference from the storm system moving in from the northwest," she announced, fingers dancing across switches and dials. "Same pattern that hit us during Operation Resolute Storm in the Hindu Kush. You compensate by shifting to Delta band and increasing signal amplification by 14%. The radio crackled back to life. Crystal clear. Perfect transmission quality. 60 seconds. Maybe less. Rodriguez stared at her like she'd just performed a magic trick he didn't understand. "That's not civilian training," he said quietly to no one in particular. "That's not even regular military training," replied Senior Chief Brooks, who had drifted closer to observe. Hartwell lifted her radio with hands that weren't quite steady. "Base operations expedite that background check. Priority Alpha." "Ma'am, we're running into classification barriers. The subject's information appears to be locked at levels requiring flag officer authorization. Possibly higher." Flag officer authorization meant admirals. Possibly higher meant something Hartwell didn't want to think about too carefully. People whose files required that kind of clearance didn't accidentally wander onto training facilities. They arrived with purpose. And that purpose usually meant someone's career was about to implode. Kane's face had gone through a fascinating journey of emotions. Confusion. Anger. Wounded pride. Deeper anger. "I don't care what you think you just did," he said, stepping closer. Close enough that his height advantage became obvious. Close enough that any reasonable person would feel intimidated. "You're still unauthorized personnel on a restricted military installation, and you're still going to answer my questions." "I've answered your questions. You've given me riddles and attitude. I've given you exactly what your behavior has earned." The words landed like a slap. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that in 11 minutes of interaction, you've demonstrated harassment, gender-based discrimination, failure to follow verification protocols, and escalating aggression toward an unknown contact." She paused, letting the assessment sink in. "If I were actually a threat, you'd have already compromised operational security by revealing the existence of classified regulations, demonstrated predictable behavior patterns that could be exploited, and positioned yourself for exactly the kind of close-quarters vulnerability that gets people killed." The silence stretched like piano wire about to snap. "I came to evaluate operational readiness," she continued. "What I found is a command structure that lets ego override procedure and intimidation substitute for leadership." Kane's voice emerged low. "Dangerous. Stripped of everything except threat. You need to be very careful about your next words." "Do I?" "You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Master Sergeant." Her voice carried that same quiet steel. "The question is whether you know who you're dealing with." Brennan stepped forward, trying to de-escalate, before this went somewhere nobody wanted. "Ma'am, whatever authority you think you have, this isn't the way to exercise it." Master Sergeant Kane is a 15-year veteran with a pattern of behavior that would trigger immediate investigation in any other command structure. She cut him off without raising her voice. "Would you like me to continue with the evaluation? Or would you prefer to start addressing the deficiencies I've already identified?" Westbrook watched from formation, every muscle tense with the effort of staying silent. He wanted to scream at Kane to stand down. He wanted to run over there and salute her and tell everyone what she'd done in Grozny. He wanted to do something that would stop this collision course before impact. But speaking would mean revealing classified information. It would mean admitting he'd been somewhere he wasn't supposed to discuss, doing things he wasn't supposed to remember, saved by someone who officially didn't exist. The Grozny operation lived in files that required presidential authorization to access. Everyone involved had been briefed on the consequences of disclosure. Some consequences were legal. Some were the kind that happened in places where people asked questions but never received answers. So Westbrook stayed silent and watched and prayed that Kane would do something intelligent for once in his arrogant life. Kane did not do something intelligent. I've had enough of this. His voice carried across the entire training yard now. Brennan, contact base security. We're having this individual detained until her identity can be verified through proper channels. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Is that a threat? It's advice, the kind that might save your career if you're smart enough to take it. My career is fine. Your career is approximately 4 bad decisions away from ending. You've already made 3 of them. I'm giving you a chance to not make the 4th. Her eyes swept across the assembled SEALs, 282 warriors who had operated in every combat zone on Earth. Men who had killed with their hands, their weapons, their intelligence. Men who thought they understood what dangerous looked like. Her gaze settled on Westbrook for just a moment. Something flickered there. Recognition. Warning. He couldn't tell. Then she looked back at Kane. Make your choice, Master Sergeant, but understand that once you make it, there's no going back. The physical fitness test began as Hartwell's attempt to restore some semblance of normal routine to a morning that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. If this woman insisted on remaining in the training area, then she would participate in training activities. It was a decision born of bureaucratic frustration rather than tactical thinking. Ma'am, announced Master Gunnery Sergeant Collins, the senior fitness instructor, if you're going to observe our training, you're going to participate in it. We're running the SEAL qualification physical screening test this morning. The test represented the highest standard of physical conditioning in the special operations community. 3-mile run in under 21 minutes, 25 pull-ups minimum, 500-meter combat swim with full equipment, standards that eliminated 90% of candidates who attempted SEAL training. The woman nodded. Acceptable. You understand what you're agreeing to? I understand. Collins exchanged a look with Kane that communicated shared anticipation. Finally. Something that would put this arrogant civilian in her place. Physical fitness didn't care about attitude or mysterious credentials. It cared about capability. And no woman, regardless of her confidence, was going to match the standards that elite male operators spent years developing. 37 SEALs lined up for the 3-mile run. The woman took a position at the back, neither seeking attention nor avoiding it. Simply present. Simply ready. The starting signal cracked across the morning air. The course wound through Coronado's coastal terrain. Hills that burned quadriceps. Sand that stole momentum. Ocean wind that pushed back against every stride. The lead pack established itself within the first quarter mile. Young SEALs with something to prove. The woman ran somewhere in the middle. Her stride was economical. Efficient. Suggesting experience with long-distance endurance challenges. At the 1-mile mark, she was running with the main pack. Respectable, nothing special. At the 2-mile mark, she was still with the pack. Some of the early leaders had faded. She had not. At the 2.5-mile mark, she began to pull away. Collins checked his stopwatch and frowned. By the time she crossed the finish line, she was running alone. 18 minutes and 47 seconds. Faster than 80% of the SEALs who had started with her. She wasn't even breathing hard. The pull-up test followed immediately, designed to exploit muscle fatigue accumulated during the run. Most SEALs struggled to complete the required 25 repetitions after 3 miles of hill running. She completed 32. Perfect form. Controlled movement, no visible strain. The combat swim presented the final challenge. Full battle dress uniform with equipment that added 40 pounds when waterlogged. 500 meters through Pacific waters that didn't care about reputation or authority. She entered the water with practiced efficiency. Her stroke technique revealed extensive experience with combat swimming protocols. She moved through the ocean like she belonged there, like the water was an ally rather than an obstacle. 11 minutes flat. When she emerged from the Pacific, streaming salt water but breathing normally, the training yard had fallen into a silence that bordered on reverence. Collins approached carefully. "Ma'am, where exactly did you serve?" "Places that don't appear on official maps." "What unit?" "The kind that doesn't exist in any database you have access to." Westbrook felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Places that don't appear on maps. Units that don't exist. These were phrases that described people like her. People who operated in the spaces between official military action and political deniability. People whose missions were so classified that their existence was denied at congressional level. People who had saved his life in Grozny. He couldn't stay silent anymore. The words came out before he could stop them, driven by 18 months of survivor's guilt and the desperate need to acknowledge what she had done. Grozny sends its regards. The woman's composure cracked for the first time. Pain flashed across her features. Genuine. Raw. Immediate. The kind of pain that came from memories that never fully healed. From operations that cost lives. From decisions that haunted you at 3 a.m. when the world was quiet and the ghosts were loud. She turned to face him across the training yard. Recognition flickered in her dark eyes. "Grozny was a long time ago, Sergeant." "Not long enough, ma'am." The exchange meant nothing to most witnesses. But it meant everything to Hartwell, who recognized the coded reference to classified operations. Operations she wasn't authorized to know existed, let alone discuss. Her radio crackled with a transmission that made her blood turn to ice water. "Ma'am, we're getting pushback from federal agencies on your background check request. They're recommending you terminate the inquiry immediately and await instructions from higher authority." Federal agencies. Instructions from higher authority. Hartwell had served 22 years in the United States Navy. She had commanded men in combat. She had made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. But she had never in all those years received instructions that scared her quite as much as the ones coming through her radio right now. Down on the training yard, Kane watched the exchange with the expression of someone who had just discovered the rules of the game were different than he thought. He approached Brennan with careful movements. "I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Get Davis Murphy and Thompson, the ones who owe us favors." Brennan hesitated. There was something in Kane's eyes he didn't like, something that had moved past wounded pride into territory that felt dangerous. "Vic, maybe we should just let this play out through official channels." "Official channels are going to bury us, Marcus. Federal involvement means investigations. Investigations mean questions. Questions mean answers that neither of us wants to give." "What are you suggesting?" Kane smiled. It was the coldest expression Brennan had ever seen on a human face. "I'm suggesting we have a private conversation with our mystery visitor. Somewhere without witnesses. Somewhere we can get real answers about who she is and what she's really doing here. And if she doesn't want to have that conversation, everyone wants to have conversations when properly motivated." Brennan felt something cold settle into his stomach. He had followed Kane for 7 years, had trusted his judgment, had covered for his methods when they pushed against regulations. But this felt different. This felt like a line that once crossed could never be uncrossed. "Marcus, are you with me or not?" The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Brennan made his choice. "I'm with you." "Good. Get the men. Meet me at the supply warehouse in 20 minutes. The supply warehouse sat at the edge of the training complex, far enough from main facilities to provide privacy for activities that required discretion. Built during the Cold War for for ammunition storage. It featured thick concrete walls, limited access points, and soundproofing designed to contain explosions. It was also equipped with security cameras that Kane knew exactly how to disable. Senior Chief Brennan found her near the hydration station, toweling off Pacific saltwater with unhurried movements of someone who had nowhere urgent to be. His approach was careful, measured, designed to appear helpful rather than threatening. Ma'am, there's been a development with your credential verification. She looked up. Those dark eyes assessed him with clinical precision. Brennan felt transparent, like she could see straight through his rehearsed concern to the ugly machinery turning beneath. What kind of development? Major Hartwell needs to verify some information directly. She's asked me to escort you to the administrative facility for processing. Which administrative facility? Building 7, Supply and Logistics. The warehouse. Brennan felt sweat prickle along his spine. She knew. Somehow she already knew. It's been converted for secure interviews, he continued. Better privacy for sensitive discussions. I'm sure it has. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Brennan had the unsettling sensation of being cataloged, evaluated, filed away for future reference, like she was memorizing everything about him for reasons he didn't want to understand. Lead the way, Senior Chief. Brennan almost argued, almost told her she didn't have to come, almost warned her about what was waiting in that warehouse. But 15 years of following orders had carved grooves into his decision-making that were too deep to escape now. He turned and walked. She followed. Westbrook watched them go from his position near Formation 7. His gut twisted with certainty that something terrible was about to happen. Garrett, yeah? Something's wrong? Everything's been wrong since that woman showed up? No, something worse. Westbrook's eyes tracked Brennan and the mystery woman as they moved toward the edge of the training complex. That's not the direction of any administrative building I know. Garrett followed his gaze. Supply warehouse. Why would Hartwell conduct a credential interview in a supply warehouse? The question answered itself even as Westbrook asked it. He remembered Kane's expression during the confrontation. The wounded pride, the simmering rage, the look of a man who had been publicly humiliated and was calculating exactly how to make someone pay for it. Oh no. West, I need to find Major Hartwell, right now. Westbrook broke formation and ran. The supply warehouse smelled like diesel fuel and old concrete. She cataloged every detail as Brennan led her through the entrance. Distance to exits, potential weapons, sight lines, cover positions. The instinctive threat assessment of someone who had survived situations where such calculations meant the difference between breathing and bleeding out. Kane was waiting inside, flanked by 3 SEALs she didn't recognize. Davis, Murphy, Thompson. Young enough to be impressionable, old enough to know better. The kind of men who followed orders without asking questions they didn't want answered. Thank you, Marcus. Kane's voice echoed slightly in the cavernous space. Secure the entrance. Brennan moved to comply. Something in his expression told her everything she needed to know about how this was supposed to end. Gentlemen, she said calmly, you're making a mistake. The only mistake, Kane replied, stepping closer, was letting you walk around this base like you belonged here. The 3 SEALs shifted to create a loose perimeter around her. Practiced, coordinated. The kind of movement that suggested this wasn't their first time cornering someone in an isolated location. Master Sergeant, whatever you think is happening here, you're wrong. What I think is happening is that an unidentified foreign agent has infiltrated a United States military installation. What I think is happening is that agent has demonstrated advanced combat training, technical knowledge of classified systems, and familiarity with operational protocols that no civilian should possess. Foreign agent? Russian, maybe? Chinese? The tradecraft is impressive, I'll give you that, but it ends here. She almost laughed. Would have if the situation weren't so dangerous for everyone involved. You think I'm a spy? I think you're a threat to national security. And I think threats to national security get handled in ways that don't involve lawyers or congressional oversight. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't quite started burning yet. Kane's hand moved toward his sidearm. The woman moved faster. Later, when they reviewed what happened, none of the witnesses could agree on exactly what they saw. It was too fast, too fluid, too far outside their experience of how human bodies were supposed to move. Kane's hand touched his weapon. Then he was on the ground. She had closed the distance between them in the time it took him to blink. Her left hand controlled his weapon arm, redirecting it away from the holster with a grip that sent pain shooting up to his shoulder. Her right hand struck something in his neck that made his vision blur and his knees buckle. The takedown was elegant in its brutality. She used his own momentum against him, redirecting his weight into a spiral that ended with his face pressed against concrete and his arm locked behind his back at an angle that promised permanent damage if he struggled. 3.2 seconds. Maybe less. "Secure him," Brennan shouted. Davis Murphy and Thompson rushed forward. The door exploded inward. Westbrook burst through first, followed by Major Hartwell and 6 armed SEALs. Their weapons swept the space, identifying targets, assessing threats, trying to make sense of a scene that defied easy explanation. 4 men on the ground or rising. 1 woman standing. 1 senior chief with a weapon half drawn, but not quite raised. "Everyone freeze," Hartwell commanded. The woman released Kane and stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening, but her eyes never stopped tracking potential threats. "Major," she said calmly, "your timing is impeccable." Hartwell stared at her, then at Kane, who was struggling to rise, then at the 3 junior SEALs in various stages of recovery from the fastest takedowns she had ever witnessed. "What the hell happened here? Your master sergeant attempted to detain and potentially murder a federal asset under the pretext of a foreign infiltration investigation." "That's not," Kane started. "Shut up, Victor." Hartwell's voice carried the weight of 22 years of command authority. "I received a very interesting phone call while you were in here playing Spy Hunter. A phone call from Admiral Morrison's office. Would you like to know what they told me?" Kane's face went pale. "They told me that the woman you just tried to kill is Commander Evelyn Blackthorne. Call sign Shadow Phoenix, assigned to the Joint Special Operations Command under classification protocols that require presidential authorization to access." The revelation hit the warehouse like a physical force. Commander, not civilian, not contractor, not foreign agent. A military officer who outranked everyone present. "They told me she's been conducting an authorized evaluation of our operational readiness and personnel conduct. An evaluation that you just failed in the most spectacular way possible." Kane opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "They told me that if any harm came to her during her time at this facility, the people responsible would face court-martial proceedings under federal jurisdiction. Not military jurisdiction. Federal. The kind where military lawyers don't get to protect their own." Brennan dropped his weapon like it had turned to poison in his hands. "Commander Blackthorne," Hartwell said, turning to the woman who had just dismantled 5 SEALs without breaking a sweat. "I apologize for—" "No apologies necessary, Major. The Master Sergeant made his choices. His men were following orders they believed were legitimate. There's a distinction." Hartwell studied her for a long moment. This woman had just single-handedly neutralized 5 SEALs who had been trying to kill her. She had every right to demand their destruction, every justification to let federal prosecutors tear their careers apart. Instead, she was arguing for proportional response. "What do you recommend?" Kane faces court-martial. He made a conscious decision to attempt murder under color of authority. Brennan receives administrative discipline and psychological evaluation. His compliance was driven by institutional loyalty rather than personal malice. The 3 junior SEALs receive retraining and counseling. They were following orders from people they trusted. That's generous. Justice should be proportional to culpability, Major. Kane is culpable. The others are guilty of poor judgment under pressure. There's a difference. As armed SEALs moved to secure Kane and Brennan, Commander Evelyn Blackthorne's encrypted phone buzzed with a priority alert that changed everything. She glanced at the screen. Her expression shifted from professional calm to something harder, colder. Major, I need to cut this evaluation short. MH60 inbound for immediate extraction. What's happened? Evelyn looked at Westbrook, who had saved her from having to kill 5 men in a warehouse. Recognition passed between them. Grozny. The fire, the screaming, the debt that could never be fully repaid. Alexei Volkov, she said quietly. The man who killed 7 of my teammates 18 months ago in Grozny. The man I've been hunting ever since. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. He's resurfaced. Yemen border region. And he's planning something that makes Grozny look like a training exercise. The sound of helicopter rotors began to build in the distance. Somewhere an enemy was waiting. Somewhere Americans were in danger. Somewhere the war that never ended was calling her back. Commander Evelyn Blackthorne walked toward the sound of those rotors without looking back. Behind her, 282 SEALs watched the woman who had walked onto their base that morning and dismantled every assumption they held about strength, authority, and the true meaning of power. Some of them would never see her again. All of them would remember her forever. The quiet ones always left marks, even when they disappeared without a trace. The helicopter's rotors beat against African sky 4 hours into the flight. Commander Evelyn Blackthorne sat motionless in the cargo bay rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon where blue met sand. The warehouse at Coronado felt like another lifetime. Kane's face in the dirt. The 282 SEALs watching. All of it already compressed into operational memory, filed away, indexed, ready to be forgotten. Now there was only the mission. Only Volkov. Only 18 months of hunting compressed into the next 12 hours. Chief Nathan Grayson shifted in the seat beside her. 38 years old. Sandy hair going gray at the temples, eyes that had seen too much and somehow managed to keep seeing more. He extended a hand with a protein bar. You need to eat something, Commander. Can't run operations on adrenaline alone. I've done it before. Doesn't make it smart. She took the bar, not because she was hungry, because Grayson was right and she needed to stay sharp. The mission ahead required every ounce of focus she possessed. Talk to me about the target, she said. Grayson pulled out a tablet displaying classified intelligence that made something cold settle into her chest. The kind of cold that came from recognizing a ghost you thought you'd buried. The photograph showed a face she had memorized in nightmares. Sharp features, dark hair going silver, eyes that held no light. No mercy, no humanity. Alexei Volkov. Ring any bells? Grayson asked quietly. Every single one, and they all sounded like screaming. Grozny, she said. December 1999. 7 teammates dead in the first 30 seconds of his ambush. My father among them. He's resurfaced. Yemen border region approximately 40 kilometers from the Saudi frontier. Intelligence indicates he's planning something big. Timeline is 72 hours, maybe less. Evelyn stared at the photograph. 18 months of hunting. 18 months of chasing shadows and rumors and intelligence reports that went nowhere. 18 months of survivor's guilt that woke her at 3 a.m. when the medication wasn't strong enough. And now he had a location. How solid is the intelligence NSA intercepts confirmed by human assets on the ground? He's there. He's planning. And whatever he's planning involves American targets. Grayson swiped to the next screen. Chatter mentions demonstration of capability and message to the Crusaders. Standard jihadist rhetoric. Except Volkov isn't a jihadist. He's a businessman. Russian SVR funding Wagner Group mercenaries on the ground. Chechen fighters for local knowledge. The operational preparation suggests something beyond standard terrorism. Evelyn scrolled through the intelligence files. Satellite imagery of a compound in mountainous terrain. Thermal scans showing multiple structures. Communications intercepts in Russian and Arabic. Financial transactions traced through shell companies in Cyprus and Dubai. This wasn't improvised. This was professional. Team composition. Your original unit plus additional operators. 12 total. Full presidential authorization for any action necessary to neutralize the threat. Presidential authorization. The highest level of operational approval. Reserved for missions that carried implications for national security and international stability. The kind of authorization that meant rules of engagement were whatever you decided they needed to be. What's the target intelligence saying about casualties? Grayson's expression darkened. Best estimate, if Volkov's plan succeeds, we're looking at coordinated attacks on 4 American cities. Biological components we're still trying to identify. Casualty projections range from 50,000 to over 100,000. 100,000 American lives. The number was so large, it became abstract, meaningless. Until you remembered that each number represented a person. A father, a mother, a child, someone who woke up that morning expecting to see tomorrow. Rules of engagement. Whatever it takes, Volkov dies tonight or he kills Americans tomorrow. Those are the only 2 options. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. For 18 months, she had carried the weight of 7 deaths she couldn't prevent. 7 teammates who had trusted her to bring them home. 7 families who received folded flags instead of living fathers and sons and brothers. Now, she had a chance to balance that ledger. Not revenge, justice. There was a difference. She had to believe there was a difference. ETA to staging area. 4 hours to the forward operating base in Djibouti. Another 6 to the insertion point. Mission window opens at 0200 local time. Evelyn looked at Volkov's photograph one more time. Then she closed the tablet and leaned back against the bulkhead. The vibration of the aircraft settled into her bones. The rhythm almost meditative, almost peaceful. She closed her eyes and let the memories come. Grozny. December 1999. The city was a graveyard of bombed-out buildings and shattered dreams. The Second Chechen War had turned the capital into a killing ground where Russian forces and Chechen separatists traded atrocities like currency. And somewhere in that chaos, American intelligence had identified a target worth the risk. A Russian SVR colonel named Mikhail Petrov, who was willing to defect, who possessed information about Russian operations throughout Central Asia, who needed extraction before his superiors discovered his treason. Colonel Harrison Dalton had led the team. 46 years old then. Gulf War veteran, 20 years of operational experience. The kind of leader who inspired absolute confidence because he'd earned it through blood and sweat and decisions that haunted him but never broke him. Lieutenant Evelyn Blackthorne had been the intelligence specialist. 26 years old. 3 years out of West Point. 2 years in Army intelligence. Selected for Delta Force liaison based on language skills and a psychological profile that used words like resilient and adaptive and comfortable with moral ambiguity. Her father had been on that team. Captain Douglas Blackthorne, 42 years old, Special Forces with 12 years of operational experience. A man who could speak 6 languages and navigate by the stars and make a joke while rounds snapped overhead. He had taught her everything. How to shoot, how to think, how to survive when survival seemed impossible, how to lead when leadership meant making choices that would haunt you forever. The mission had started clean. Insertion via low-altitude helicopter drop 5 kilometers outside Grozny. Movement through urban terrain using local assets for cover. Contact with Petrov at a predetermined safe house. Extraction via ground vehicle to the Georgian border. Simple, straightforward, routine. Except Alexei Volkov had been waiting. The ambush came at the safe house, RPGs from rooftops, heavy machine gun fire from windows. Coordinated, professional. The kind of attack that spoke to detailed intelligence and careful preparation. The first RPG hit their lead vehicle and turned it into a funeral pyre. 3 men died screaming. The second RPG hit the building behind them and brought the facade down in a shower of concrete and rebar. Evelyn remembered the chaos. The noise so loud it became silence. The smoke so thick it became darkness. The certainty that she was going to die in a Russian city for a mission that would be officially denied. Her father had pulled her from the wreckage, blood streaming down his face from a scalp wound that looked worse than it was. His rifle was up firing controlled bursts at targets she couldn't see, his voice cutting through the chaos with the calm of a man who had been here before and survived and would survive again. Stay low. Move when I move. We're getting out of here. But they hadn't gotten out. Not all of them. Volkov's fighters had been everywhere. Behind. Flanking. Above. The team had tried to fight their way to the extraction point, but the resistance was too organized, too prepared. Someone had sold them out. Someone had told Volkov they were coming. Douglas Blackthorne had made a choice. The kind of choice that fathers make when their children are in danger. The kind of choice that saves lives at the cost of your own. He had drawn fire, deliberately. Positioned himself at a choke point where his weapon could cover the team's withdrawal. Told them to run while he held. Promised he would follow. He hadn't followed. Evelyn heard the gunfire behind them as they ran. Heard it crescendo. Heard it stop with a finality that meant only one thing. 7 teammates died in Grozny. Douglas Blackthorne was one of them. By the time they made it to the extraction point, Volkov had disappeared into the Chechen mountains like smoke. Petrov was dead. The mission was a failure, and Evelyn Blackthorne had spent the next 18 months hunting the man who killed her father. The helicopter began its descent toward Djibouti. Evelyn opened her eyes and found Grayson watching her with the expression of someone who understood exactly where she'd been. You good, Commander? Define good. Functional enough to lead this mission without getting us killed. By that definition, yes. Good enough. The forward operating base was exactly what she expected. Prefab structures behind concrete barriers, topped with razor wire. Guard towers with night vision and heavy weapons. The smell of diesel generators and latrine chemicals, and the particular stink that came from too many people living too close together in a desert climate. Home, in the way that operational bases became home when you spent more time deployed than stateside. The briefing room was crowded with the kind of controlled chaos that preceded high-risk operations. Maps on every wall, satellite imagery on screens, weapons and equipment staged for immediate access. The quiet hum of professionals preparing to do violence on behalf of people who would never know their names. Colonel Harrison Dalton stood at the head of the table, 64 years old now. Gray hair cut military short, face carved from weathered leather and old scars. The Purple Heart from Desert Storm visible on his uniform when he wore one. Which wasn't often these days because men like Dalton had moved beyond caring about decorations. He looked up when Evelyn entered. Something passed between them. Recognition. Respect. The shared weight of Grozny and everything that came after. Commander Blackthorne. Good flight. Long enough to review the intelligence. Bad enough to know this is going to be ugly. Ugly's what we do. Dalton gestured to the assembled operators. You know most of these men. Some worked with your father. All of them volunteered for this specifically because of what happened in Grozny. Evelyn looked around the room. Grayson she knew. Senior Chief Marcus Brenner was Delta Force 40 years old, veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Lieutenant Jack Cordell was Navy SEAL, 32 expert in demolitions. Sergeant First Class Devin Hawthorne was Army Ranger 28 sniper with confirmed kills in 3 combat zones. The rest were operators she'd seen in passing, men with hard eyes and quiet voices, men who killed for their country and slept fine afterward because someone had to, and it might as well be them. Gentlemen, Evelyn said, thank you for volunteering. Let's make sure we all get home. Dalton activated the main display. Satellite imagery filled the screen. The compound sat in mountainous terrain 40 kilometers from the Saudi border. 3 main structures arranged in a rough triangle. Secondary buildings that intelligence suggested housed civilians. Women and children brought in as human shields because Volkov understood Western operational constraints. Target is Alexei Volkov, Russian national former SVR current freelancer working with Chechen separatists and Wagner Group mercenaries. Intelligence suggests 12 to 15 armed combatants on site, mix of Russian Chechen and possibly Iranian advisors. Dalton paused, letting that sink in. Iranian involvement meant this was bigger than one man's vendetta. This was geopolitical. This was the kind of operation that could start wars if it went wrong. Hostage situation. Unknown. Thermal imaging shows multiple signatures in the secondary buildings, but we can't confirm combatant versus non-combatant status. Evelyn studied the imagery. The compound was well positioned. High ground with clear sight lines, limited approach vectors. Early warning systems that would detect conventional assault long before it reached the target. Volkov had learned from Grozny. He wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. What's the recommended approach? Dalton pulled up a tactical overlay. Red lines showed the standard route, through the valley, using terrain for cover, methodical, by the book. The kind of approach that got taught at Fort Bragg and Coronado. This is what conventional doctrine suggests. Insert here. Move along this ridgeline. Establish overwatch positions. Conduct reconnaissance. Plan detailed assault based on updated intelligence. How long? 24 to 36 hours from insertion to execution. We don't have 36 hours. Intelligence says Volkov's timeline is 72 hours, and we've already burned 4 just getting here. Grayson leaned forward. Commander, rushing this gets people killed. We've all seen what happens when operations move faster than intelligence can support. I've also seen what happens when we move too slow. Grozny happened because we followed doctrine, because we telegraphed our intentions, because Volkov had time to prepare. Evelyn's voice carried an edge that made every operator in the room pay attention. He's expecting us to come at him the way we came at him before. Methodical, careful, professional. And you're suggesting we don't? Evelyn traced a different route on the map. Through terrain marked as impassable, along cliff faces and narrow defiles that no sane person would attempt at night with full equipment. I'm suggesting we give him creative instead of conventional. The room fell silent. Every operator understood what she was proposing. It was insane. It was dangerous. It collapsed extraction timelines and eliminated backup options and put the entire team at risk if anything went wrong. It was also exactly the kind of thing that might work precisely because it shouldn't. Brenner spoke first. Commander, that approach takes us through terrain that'll shred our timeline. If things go wrong, extraction becomes problematic at best. If things go wrong following conventional doctrine, we walk into a prepared kill zone and none of us come home. I'll take problematic extraction over certain death. Lieutenant Cordell studied the route. It's technically possible. Barely. But it requires near-perfect execution. No room for error. Then we don't make errors. Sergeant Hawthorne, the sniper, traced sight lines with his finger. If we come in through here, I can establish overwatch on this ridge, 800 meters to the main compound, within my effective range for support. Dalton watched Evelyn carefully. 64 years of experience reading people, reading situations, reading the difference between confident and reckless. This is personal for you, Commander. Volkov killed your father, 7 of your teammates. Are you sure this is tactical judgment and not something else? The question hung in the air like smoke. Every operator waited for her answer. Evelyn met Dalton's gaze without flinching. Colonel, you were there in Grozny. You pulled me from that wreckage. You made a promise to my father that you'd look after me. You've kept that promise for 18 months while I hunted the man who killed him. She paused. Is this personal? Yes. Does that make me wrong? You tell me. Dalton was quiet for a long moment. Memories flickering behind his eyes. Douglas Blackthorne's face. The gunfire. The choice between saving the team or going back for one man. Your father made a choice in Grozny, Dalton said finally. He drew fire so the rest of us could live. His voice roughened. I've spent 18 months asking myself if I made the right call leaving him behind. But I know what he'd say. Finish the mission. Protect the team. Don't let vengeance cloud judgment. This isn't vengeance, Colonel. It's justice. Is there a difference? There has to be. Because if there isn't, then we're no better than Volkov. The statement landed like a physical weight, defining the moral line that separated operators from murderers, the line that let them sleep at night despite the things they'd done, the line that made them defenders instead of killers. Grayson broke the silence. Commander, I've followed you into worse situations than this. If you say, this is the play, then this is the play. But I need to hear you say it's for the mission, not for your father. Evelyn looked around the room. 12 operators. 12 men who would follow her into hell if she asked. 12 lives that depended on her judgment being sound. The mission is stopping Volkov before he kills 100,000 Americans. Everything else is secondary. My father, Grozny. All of it. We're here to save lives, not settle scores. She paused, letting the words carry weight. But if Volkov dies in the process of accomplishing that mission, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Dalton nodded slowly. Fair enough. Let's talk specifics. They spent the next 3 hours planning. Insertion points, approach routes, contingency plans for when things went wrong because things always went wrong, weapons loadout, communications protocols, medical evacuation procedures, the 1,000 details that separated successful operations from disasters. At 1900 hours, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady. Every operator's hand moved toward weapons, training, instinct. The kind that kept you alive when power outages preceded ambushes. Generator shift, Dalton said calmly from the head of the table, but his hand rested on his sidearm too. Old habits from old wars. Evelyn's eyes tracked the exits, the windows, heat signatures on thermal, all clear. But something felt wrong. The kind of wrong that lived in your gut and screamed warnings your conscious mind hadn't processed yet. Grayson's phone buzzed against the table. He glanced at the screen. Expression neutral, professional. The same expression he always wore when operational updates arrived. Intel update from NSA, he announced. Volkov's timeline accelerated. Communications intercept suggests 48 hours, not 72. He's moving faster than projected. The window was closing. Evelyn felt the pressure settle onto her shoulders like a physical weight. 48 hours meant they had maybe 36 before Volkov went dark. Maybe less. We move tonight, she decided. Insertion at 2200 hours. No delays, no second guessing. We get one shot at this. Around the table, operators nodded. The mission had just become a race against a clock nobody could see. Sergeant Tyler Westbrook arrived during the planning session, transferred from Coronado at Evelyn's request via encrypted communication that bypassed standard channels. He entered the briefing room with the nervous energy of someone who'd just been pulled from normal duty and thrown into something classified. Sergeant Westbrook reporting as ordered commander. Evelyn looked up from the tactical maps. Sergeant, thank you for coming. Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here. The orders said immediate deployment, but didn't specify mission parameters. You're here because you were in Grozny. You know what Volkov is capable of. And because 18 months ago I pulled you from a burning vehicle and told you not today. Remember? Westbrook nodded, memory flooding back. The heat. The smoke? Her face appearing through the chaos like something from a dream. Her voice cutting through his panic with absolute certainty. I remember, ma'am. Good. Because tonight, we're going to return the favor for 7 teammates who didn't make it out. And I need people I can trust. People who understand what's at stake. I won't let you down, Commander. I know you won't. That's why you're here. At 1800 hours, they received updated intelligence. NSA had intercepted communications suggesting Volkov's timeline had accelerated. Whatever he was planning might launch in 48 hours instead of 72. The window was closing. At 2000 hours, they conducted weapons checks, suppressed rifles, sidearms, explosives, night vision, communications equipment, the tools of their trade laid out with the precision of surgical instruments. Because that's what this was. Surgery. Cutting out a cancer before it metastasized. At 2200 hours, they boarded helicopters for the insertion flight. The sun had set over Djibouti, leaving the base bathed in artificial light and lengthening shadows. Evelyn sat in the lead aircraft, watching Africa disappear into darkness below. Grayson settled in beside her. You nervous? Just always. That's good. Nervous means careful. Careful means alive. What happens if the intel is wrong? What happens if Volkov isn't there? Then we adapt. Find him. Finish this. And if he is there, but it's a trap. Grayson was quiet for a moment. Then we do what we've always done. We fight. We survive. We make sure the other guy doesn't. The helicopter flew through darkness toward Yemen, toward Volkov, toward a reckoning that had been 18 months in the making. Below, the landscape shifted from African scrubland to Arabian desert. The temperature dropped as they gained altitude. The air grew thin. Evelyn checked her equipment one final time. Rifle, ammunition, communications, medical kit. Everything in its place. Everything ready. She thought about her father, about the choice he'd made in Grozny, about the years she'd spent trying to understand if it was sacrifice or suicide. She thought about Kane back at Coronado, about the warehouse, about the lesson he'd learned about underestimating the quiet ones, about how strength had nothing to do with intimidation and everything to do with purpose. She thought about the 100,000 Americans whose lives depended on tonight going right. People who would never know her name, never know how close they came to dying, never know that somewhere in the darkness, operators were hunting monsters so civilians could sleep safe. Colonel Dalton's voice came through her headset. Ground command from the Tactical Operations Center. The old man couldn't go into the field anymore, but he could damn well make sure everyone who did had the best support possible. Shadow Phoenix, this is Ironhide. Radio check. Ironhide, Shadow Phoenix. Read you Lima Charlie. Weather is clear at insertion point. Satellite shows minimal activity at target compound. You're green for insertion at planned coordinates. Copy Ironhide. 20 minutes out. 20 minutes until they jumped into darkness with nothing but parachutes and prayer. 20 minutes until they began the approach that would either end with Volkov dead or the team in body bags. 20 minutes until everything that had led to this moment paid off or proved worthless. Evelyn closed her eyes and thought about her father one last time. Not the way he died. The way he lived. The lessons he taught. The values he embodied. Duty. Honor. Sacrifice. The things that made the uniform mean something beyond cloth and thread. She opened her eyes and found every operator in the helicopter watching her, waiting for words that would carry them through what came next. Gentlemen, she said, voice carrying over the rotor noise, tonight we hunt a ghost, a man who's killed Americans and gotten away with it because he's smart and careful and very good at what he does. But he made one mistake. He left witnesses. He left survivors. He left people who remember. She paused, letting the weight settle. We're not here for revenge. We're here because 100,000 American lives depend on us doing our job. We're here because nobody else can do what we do. We're here because when the darkness comes, someone has to stand in it and push back. The operators nodded. No cheers, no bravado, just quiet acceptance of the mission. The helicopter began its descent toward the insertion point. The crew chief signaled 5 minutes, then 3, then 1. The door opened. Arabian night rushed in, cold and dark and full of possibility. Go, go, go! Evelyn stepped into darkness and fell toward the earth below. Around her, 11 other operators fell through the same darkness. 12 shadows against the night. 12 ghosts hunting one. The parachute deployed with a jerk that was violent and comforting all at once. Below, the terrain resolved into rocky ridges and narrow valleys. The compound sat 3 kilometers to the east. Dark, except for scattered lights that suggested generators and human presence. They landed in silence, collapsed parachutes, buried them under rocks and sand, conducted communications checks, confirmed everyone was down safe and ready to move. Then they began the approach. Through terrain that map said was impassable, along routes that required climbing equipment and trust and the certain knowledge that one mistake meant a fall that ended everything. Evelyn moved at point. Behind her, the team flowed like water. Quiet, efficient, professional. The kind of movement that came from training and trust, and the understanding that everyone's life depended on everyone else doing their job perfectly. 2 hours into the approach, Sergeant Hawthorne established overwatch position on the ridge overlooking the compound. 800 meters. Within effective range for his rifle, he settled into position with the patience of a man who understood that snipers measured time differently than other humans. Overwatch set. I have eyes on target compound. Count 12 visible hostiles, armed with AK variants and RPGs. Patrol patterns suggest professional training. Evelyn acknowledged and kept moving. 1 hour later, they reached the final approach point. 500 meters from the compound. Close enough to see details through night vision. Far enough that mistakes wouldn't immediately compromise the mission. She studied the compound through her scope. 3 main structures arranged in a triangle, guards at key points. Lights in the main building suggesting Volkov's command center. Thermal imaging showed 26 signatures total. More than intelligence predicted. Always more than intelligence predicted. Shadow Phoenix Ironhide. Thermal shows higher numbers than expected. I'm seeing 26 signatures, not 15. Dalton's voice came back immediately. Shadow Phoenix recommend abort and replan. Those numbers change the tactical equation. Evelyn stared at the compound. Somewhere in there, Volkov was planning mass murder. Somewhere in there, intelligence materials detailed attacks on American cities. Somewhere in there, time was running out. Negative Ironhide. We're committed. Adjusting plan to account for increased hostile count. Commander, this is exactly the kind of escalation that gets teams killed. Understood, Colonel. But we're the only asset in position. If we pull back, Volkov slips away, and 100,000 Americans die. Not acceptable. A long pause. Then, Dalton's voice rough with emotion and memory. Your father would tell you to trust your team. My father would tell me to finish the mission. I'm doing both. Evelyn switched to team frequency. All elements revised plan. Increased hostile count means we need diversion at south perimeter. Cordell Brenner, your diversion team. Create noise draw forces away from main building. Rest of us go in through north approach. Hawthorne provides overwatch and eliminates targets of opportunity. Commander, that leaves you with 8 operators going against 20 plus hostiles. Which is why the diversion needs to be convincing. Make them think you're the main effort. By the time they realize otherwise, we're already inside. The team acknowledged. No arguments, no debates. They trusted her judgment even when it seemed insane, especially when it seemed insane, because insane was often the only thing that worked against enemies who expected professional. At 02:15 hours, the operation began. Cordell and Brenner moved into position at the south wall. Hawthorne settled deeper into his Hyde rifle, trained on guard positions. The assault element began final approach from the north. At 02:20, Cordell initiated the diversion. Flashbangs detonated against the south wall. Small arms fire raked guard positions. Controlled chaos designed to simulate a larger assault force. The compound erupted in response. Guards rushed toward the south wall. Lights blazed to life. Radio chatter exploded across frequencies that NSA was monitoring and relaying in real time. And in that chaos, Evelyn Blackthorne led her team through the north approach like smoke through a keyhole. 8 operators moving with such silence that the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. They reached the main building without detection. Evelyn stacked her team at the door. 4 operators. 4 heartbeats. 4 lives depending on what happened in the next 60 seconds. She thought about her father one last time, remembered his voice, his lessons, his sacrifice, his... Then, she breached the door and entered the darkness where Alexei Volkov waited. Where 18 months of hunting ended. Where justice and vengeance collided in ways that would echo for years. The operation was no longer theoretical. It was real. It was happening. And there was no turning back. The interior of the building smelled like gun oil and old fear. Concrete walls absorbed sound, like a grave absorbs rain. Evelyn moved through the darkness with her rifle up and her breathing controlled. Behind her, Grayson and Westbrook flowed like shadows. Behind them, 5 more operators whose names would never appear in any official record. The hallway stretched ahead. Bare bulbs every 10 meters, casting pools of yellow light separated by darkness. Doors on either side, each one a potential ambush. Each one requiring split-second decisions about breach or bypass. Evelyn's night vision turned the world into shades of green. Heat signatures bloomed through walls. 3 hostiles on the second floor, 2 more in a room to the left. The thermal imaging painted a picture of defensive positions that suggested Volkov knew they were coming. Of course he knew. Men like Volkov didn't survive by being careless. The first hostile appeared at the far end of the hallway. AK-47 coming up. Mouth opening to shout a warning. Evelyn's suppressed rifle whispered twice. The man dropped without making a sound. 2 center mass shots that punched through body armor and turned lungs into hamburger. Grayson was already moving. Grabbed the body. Dragged it into shadows. Kept the team's presence quiet for another 30 seconds. Every second counted. Every heartbeat of surprise was tactical advantage that couldn't be replaced. They reached the stairwell. Voices above. Russian mixed with Chechen. The guttural sound of men who'd seen combat and weren't impressed by it anymore. Professionals doing a job. Evelyn signaled. Westbrook moved up with a flashbang. Cooked it for 2 seconds. Tossed it up the stairwell. The explosion was contained by concrete, but still loud enough to shred eardrums and turn eyes into useless jelly. The team rushed up. 2 hostiles stumbling blind and deaf. Mercy might have been letting them live. But mercy wasn't on the menu tonight. Evelyn put them down with shots that were clinical in their precision. Headshots. Instant death. No suffering. She wasn't a monster. She was a professional. There was a difference. The second floor opened into a larger space. What might have been a barracks once. Now converted into an operations center. Maps on walls showing American cities. New York. Los Angeles. Chicago. Washington, D.C. Red circles marking targets. Numbers indicating casualty estimates. Timelines showing coordination down to the minute. This wasn't terrorism. This was warfare conducted through proxies and plausible deniability. This was what happened when nation-states decided to attack without declaring war. Grayson photographed everything with a camera no bigger than a matchbox. Intelligence that would be analyzed by people with security clearances that required polygraphs and psychological evaluations. Intelligence that might prevent wars or start them depending on who saw it and what they decided to do. Movement to the right. A door opening. Hostile with an RPG. The kind of weapon that turned enclosed spaces into death traps. Sergeant Hawthorne's voice crackled through the radio. Contact right. RPG. Taking the shot. The window exploded inward. The hostile's head snapped back as 800 meters away, Hawthorne's bullet arrived at 3,000 feet per second. The body dropped. The RPG clattered to the floor unfired. Target down. You're clear for 10 seconds before someone investigates that window. 10 seconds. Evelyn used 8. Her team flowed through the operations center and toward the final door. The one that thermal imaging said led to Volkov's personal quarters. The one where heat signatures showed a single occupant. 18 months of hunting. 7 teammates dead. Her father's face in her dreams every night. All of it leading to this door. This moment. This choice between justice and murder. She stacked her team. 4 operators. Rifles ready. Grayson with a breaching charge that could turn the door into shrapnel. Westbrook with a flashbang that could turn the room into temporary hell. On my mark, Evelyn whispered. 3, 2. The door exploded inward before she reached one. Volkov had been waiting. The door was rigged with a shaped charge that blew outward. Shrapnel and concussive force that should have killed everyone in the hallway. Would have killed them if Evelyn hadn't trusted her instincts and held the team back an extra meter. The blast threw them against the far wall. Evelyn's ears rang, her vision blurred, but her rifle was still in her hands, and her training was still in her muscles. And 18 months of preparation meant she was moving before her conscious mind caught up. She rolled into the room, smoke and dust and chaos. A figure moving in the corner, raising a weapon. Not Volkov. One of his guards. Evelyn fired. The figure dropped. Then she saw him, Alexei. Volkov stood at the far end of the room with a pistol in one hand and a detonator in the other. 47 years old, silver hair, eyes like a shark's. No fear, no hesitation. Just cold calculation of odds and options. Commander Blackthorne, his English was perfect. Accent barely noticeable. I've been expecting you, although I thought you'd come through the window. The door was perhaps too obvious. Put down the detonator, Volkov. This... He held it up. Dead man's switch, connected to enough explosives to level this entire compound, including the secondary buildings where 32 civilians are currently sleeping. Women, children, the human shields I knew would complicate your moral calculus. Behind Evelyn, Grayson and Westbrook moved into the room. Rifles trained on Volkov. 3 red dots painted his chest. 3 operators who could drop him before he blinked, but if he died, his hand released the detonator. If his hand released the detonator, 32 civilians died, including children. The trolley problem made real. Kill 1 man and save 100,000 Americans, but kill 32 civilians in the process. Math that didn't account for souls or morality, or the weight that settled into your chest when you made choices like this. You're bluffing, Evelyn said. Those civilians are your insurance. You won't kill them. Won't I? Volkov smiled. Commander, I've been playing this game since before you were born. I've killed hundreds. Thousands, if you count indirect casualties. 32 more won't cost me any sleep, but they'll cost you plenty. I've read your file. I know what Grozny did to you. I know you wake up screaming about the teammates you couldn't save. Adding 32 civilians to that list, that will destroy you. Then why are we talking? If you're willing to kill them anyway, drop the detonator and let's finish this. Because I'm offering you a deal. What kind of deal? Let me walk out of here. I disappear. You get the intelligence materials showing the attack plans. You save your 100,000 Americans. Everyone wins. Except the next time you surface, more people die. Perhaps, but that's a problem for future you. Right now, you have a choice: justice or mercy, revenge or pragmatism, your father's death or those children's lives. Volkov's smile widened. Choose. Evelyn felt time stretch like taffy, every second lasting hours, every heartbeat thundering in her ears. Behind her, Grayson's voice was barely audible. Commander, your call, but make it fast. Brenner and Cordell report heavy resistance at South Wall. We're running out of time. She thought about her father, about the choice he'd made in Grozny. Drawing fire so others could live, sacrificing himself so the mission could succeed. Was that justice or suicide, revenge or duty? She thought about Kane back at Coronado, about the lesson she'd taught him. That strength wasn't dominance. That power wasn't intimidation. That real leadership meant making the hard choices when easy ones were available. She thought about Dalton's voice on the radio. Your father would tell you to trust your team. And suddenly she knew what to do. Westbrook, she said quietly. When I give the signal, you're going to shoot the detonator out of his hand. You've got one chance. Miss, and 32 people die. Commander, that's an impossible shot. The detonator is maybe 3 inches square. In his hand. Moving target. You made an impossible shot in Grozny. Pulled me from that vehicle when you were wounded and half blind from smoke. You didn't miss then. You won't miss now. Westbrook's voice steadied. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn kept her eyes on Volkov. Here's my counteroffer. You drop the detonator. Surrender. Face trial. Your intelligence gets you a deal. Maybe life in prison instead of death penalty. Maybe you see daylight again before you're 80. Volkov laughed. You think I'm afraid of prison, Commander? I've been in Russian prisons. American prisons are hotels by comparison. Then you've got nothing to lose by surrendering. I have my pride, my reputation, the knowledge that I beat you, that I killed your father and 7 of your teammates and got away with it. That's worth more than freedom. Pride won't keep you warm when you're bleeding out on this floor. Neither will those dead children keep you warm when you're drinking yourself to sleep every night. The standoff stretched. 2 predators, 2 professionals. 2 people who understood that wars weren't won by armies. They were won by individuals making choices in moments like this. Colonel Dalton's voice cut through the radio. Urgent, controlled, but underneath fear. Shadow Phoenix Ironhide. Thermal imaging shows movement in the secondary buildings. Civilians are waking up. If shooting starts, they're going to panic and run directly into the crossfire. The window was closing. Every second increased the odds of disaster. Evelyn made her choice. Grayson, shoot the support beam above his head. On 3. Grayson didn't question. Didn't hesitate. Just shifted his aim 6 inches up and waited. Westbrook, on 3, you take the shot on the detonator. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn counted in her head, gave Volkov one last chance to be smart. Last offer. Drop the detonator. Live, or die here and take 32 civilians with you. Your choice. Volkov's smile never wavered. Commander, I don't think you have the stomach for this. You're too soft, too moral, too American. You'll hesitate, and in that hesitation, I'll win. 3. Grayson fired. The support beam exploded. Concrete and rebar showered down. Volkov flinched, looked up. And, in that half second of distraction, Westbrook fired. The bullet struck the detonator with precision that bordered on divine intervention. The device shattered. Volkov's hand jerked back. His finger spasmed, but there was nothing to trigger. The explosive sat dormant in the secondary buildings. 32 civilians slept on, unaware of how close they'd come to death. Evelyn was moving before the pieces of the detonator hit the floor. She closed the distance to Volkov in 3 strides. Hit him with her shoulder. drove him into the wall, stripped the pistol from his hand, put her rifle barrel against his temple. For 18 months, she dreamed of this moment, the man who killed her father. On his knees, at her mercy. One trigger pull away from justice, or revenge, or whatever word made her feel better about pulling it. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Volkov looked up at her. No fear in his eyes, just calculation. Do it. Make yourself the monster you think I am. Cross that line. See if you can live with yourself afterward. She wanted to. God help her, she wanted to. Wanted to see his blood on the floor. Wanted to hear him beg the way her father must have begged. Wanted 18 months of nightmares to end with a bang and brain matter and silence. But Grayson's hand settled on her shoulder. Gentle, firm. The touch of a friend who understood temptation and had stood at this same crossroads before. Commander, the mission is to stop the attack, not to become an executioner. Let the system handle him. The system let him walk away from Grozny. Then we make sure it doesn't happen again. But if you pull that trigger, you don't get to walk away. Not really. I've been where you are. I know what it costs. Evelyn's finger eased off the trigger. She grabbed Volkov by the collar and hauled him to his feet, zip-tied his hands behind his back. Spoke into her radio with a voice that shook but held. Ironhide Shadow Phoenix. Target secured. I repeat, Volkov is in custody. No civilian casualties. Dalton's voice came back rough with emotion. Copy Shadow Phoenix. Well done. Extraction inbound. 20 minutes. The extraction was textbook. Brenner and Cordell rejoined the main element. Hawthorne provided overwatch as they moved through the compound collecting intelligence materials. Documents, hard drives, maps. The complete operational plan for attacks that would now never happen. In the secondary buildings, civilians slept through the entire operation. 32 lives saved by an impossible shot, and a commander who chose justice over revenge. The helicopters arrived at 0345. Loaded the team and their prisoner. Lifted off into darkness. Below the compound sat silent. No bodies. No evidence. No indication that anything had happened beyond shadows, moving through shadows. Volkov sat between two operators who watched him with the cold attention of people who understood exactly what he was capable of. He looked at Evelyn across the helicopter cabin. You made a mistake not killing me, Commander. I'll be out in 5 years. 10 at most. And when I am, I'll come for you. I'll come for everyone you love. I'll finish what I started in Grozny. Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. Threats from a man in zip ties. How terrifying. You think I'm bluffing? I think you're a relic. A dinosaur who doesn't understand that the world changed while you were playing spy games in Chechnya. Men like you are extinct. You just don't know it yet. We'll see. The forward operating base in Djibouti looked the same as when they'd left. But everything was different. They'd gone out as hunters. They came back as victors. The difference was subtle, but absolute. The debriefing lasted 8 hours. Intelligence officers dissected every second of the operation. Analyzed every decision. Photographed every document recovered from Volkov's compound. The attack plan was worse than initial estimates. Coordinated strikes on 4 cities. Biological weapons components smuggled through diplomatic channels. Sleeper cells activated through encrypted communications. Casualty estimates ranged from 80,000 to over 120,000 Americans. All stopped because 12 operators moved through darkness and made choices that would haunt some of them forever. The sleeper cells? Evelyn asked. FBI is rolling them up now. 17 arrests in the last 6 hours. More expected as we decrypt the communications logs. The network is finished. And Volkov. Transfer to Gitmo within 72 hours. Then federal court for trial. With the intelligence he's providing, in exchange for life in prison, we're looking at counterintelligence victories that'll take years to fully appreciate. Evelyn nodded. Justice served. Not the justice she wanted. but the justice the system provided. It would have to be enough. She found Westbrook outside the debriefing room, staring at nothing, processing what he'd done. Hell of a shot, Sergeant. I almost missed. Another half inch and it would have hit his hand, triggered the detonator, killed everyone. But you didn't miss. You made the shot, saved 32 lives. Did I? Westbrook turned to look at her. Or did I just delay the inevitable? Volkov said he'd be out in 5 years. What happens then? Then we deal with it. That's what we do. We deal with threats as they emerge. We don't get to see the future. We just get to shape it as best we can. Grozny shaped you, Commander. I was there. I saw what it did to you. If I'd missed tonight, would this have broken you? Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Honest self-assessment required looking at things you'd rather ignore. Yes, she said finally. If those civilians had died, it would have broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. But they didn't die, because you trusted me and I trusted you, and together we did something impossible. Is that what teams do? That's exactly what teams do. 3 months later, Commander Evelyn Blackthorne stood in a different room. Pentagon basement, secure conference facility with no windows and walls designed to prevent electronic eavesdropping. The kind of room where decisions got made that shaped the world in ways the world would never know. The Navy Cross ceremony had been the week before. 200 people in attendance, Admiral Morrison pinning the medal to her chest. Citation reading extraordinary heroism in action against enemy forces. Prevented mass casualty attacks estimated at over 100,000 American lives. The medal sat in a box in her quarters. She hadn't looked at it since the ceremony. Medals were for politicians and public relations. The work was something else entirely. Today, she was here for something different. Colonel Dalton sat across from her, 64 years old, and every one of them visible in the lines around his eyes. The mission in Yemen had taken something from him. She could see it in the way he moved, the way he breathed, the way he looked at her with something that might have been pride or might have been regret. Commander, thank you for coming. You made it sound important, Colonel. It is. Dalton slid a classified folder across the table. New threat assessment, bigger than Volkov, more sophisticated, more dangerous. Evelyn opened the folder, read the first page, felt something cold settle into her chest. Project Prometheus. What is that? State Actor Consortium. Multiple hostile intelligence services working together. Russian FSB, Iranian Quds Force, Chinese MSS. They're pooling resources, sharing intelligence, coordinating operations against American interests worldwide. Why haven't I heard about this? Because it was classified at levels that required presidential authorization to access, until last week when someone decided the threat was serious enough to brief operational commanders. Evelyn kept reading. The scope was staggering. Operations across 4 continents. Penetration of American intelligence networks. Sleeper agents in positions of trust. Volkov hadn't been an isolated threat. He'd been part of something much larger. How long has this been going on? Best estimate 5 years, maybe longer. We're still trying to determine the full scope. In my role, you're being assigned to lead a new task force. Handpicked operators, full presidential authorization. Rules of engagement are whatever you decide they need to be. The same authorization that covered Yemen, the same blank check that let operators make choices that politicians could deny later. The same responsibility that kept her awake at 3 a.m. when the ghosts were loud. When do I start? You already have. Dalton tapped the folder. Page 7. Target assessment. Evelyn flipped pages, read operational summaries, intelligence estimates, threat analysis. Then she reached page 7 and the world tilted sideways. The photograph showed a man in his late 30s, sandy hair going gray, eyes that she'd looked into 1,000 times, a face she trusted absolutely. Chief Nathan Grayson, her second in command, Her friend. The man who'd talked her out of executing Volkov. The man who'd been with her through 3 years of operations across 2 continents. The man who'd been working for Project Prometheus the entire time. No. The word came out barely above a whisper. This is wrong. Grayson would never. Confirmed last week through signals intelligence. He's been their asset since before Yemen. Before Grozny. Every operation you've conducted, every target you've hit, he's been feeding intelligence back to his handlers. That's impossible. He saved my life in Afghanistan. He was at the medal ceremony. He's a professional. Same as you. Same as all of us. Except he chose a different side. Evelyn stared at the photograph. Memories flooding back. Conversations that seemed innocent at the time, but now carried different weight. Questions that seemed natural, but might have been intelligence gathering. Moments of hesitation that could have been conscience or could have been calculation. How long had she been compromised? How many operations had failed because Grayson warned the targets? How many people died because she trusted the wrong person? Timeline for capture. 48 hours. After that, we assume he'll be warned and disappear. He's that good. He's that. In 48 hours to hunt someone who knew exactly how she operated. Who understood her tactics and her psychology and her weaknesses. 48 hours to make choices about justice and revenge, and whether there was still a difference. Evelyn closed the folder. Stood. Felt the weight of the Navy Cross like an anchor around her neck. Felt the weight of her father's death in Grozny and every choice she'd ever made settling onto her shoulders. I'll need a team. Pick whoever you want. Resources are unlimited. Presidential authorization is already signed. I want Westbrook, Brenner, Cordell, Hawthorne, the Yemen team minus Grayson. Done. They're being notified now. 48 hours became 47, then 36, then 12. Grayson had vanished from his apartment in Alexandria. His car sat in the parking garage. His phone went straight to voicemail. The professional inside Evelyn recognized the tradecraft. He'd known they were coming. But he'd made one mistake. Everyone made one mistake. Westbrook found it buried in Grayson's financial records. A safe house. Not under his name. Under a dead drop identity from an operation 3 years prior. The kind of identity that shouldn't exist in any database. The kind that only someone with access to Evelyn's operational files would know about. The confrontation happened at dawn, a farmhouse outside Fredericksburg. Grayson standing on the porch with a cup of coffee, like he'd been expecting them. No weapon visible, no hostility, just the calm of a man who'd already made his peace. I wondered how long it would take, he said. Evelyn kept her rifle trained on his chest. Westbrook and Brenner flanked her. Cordell covered the back. Professional, tactical, no room for emotion. Why? Why betray you, or why did I let you catch me? Both. Grayson set down his coffee. Project Prometheus approached me 5 years ago, before I met you. They had leverage, my sister's family in Kiev. You don't say no to people who can make families disappear. You could have come to me. We could have protected them. Can you protect everyone? Commander, your father couldn't. Dalton couldn't. What makes you different? The question hung between them like smoke. The intelligence I gave them saved more lives than it cost, Grayson continued. Prevented escalation. Kept conflicts contained. What you call betrayal, I call strategic balance. You call it whatever helps you sleep. I call it treason. Then arrest me. Add me to your list of victories. But no, this Project Prometheus is bigger than me. Bigger than Volkov. You're fighting symptoms, not the disease. Evelyn lowered her rifle. Not surrender. Decision. You're right. It is bigger. Which is why I need you to testify. Full cooperation. Names. Operations. Everything. In exchange, we protect your sister's family. Grayson smiled sadly. You'd use my family as leverage. I'd use whatever it takes to protect 100 million Americans, just like you did. She paused. The difference is, I'm asking you to choose the right side. Silence stretched across the Virginia morning. Birds sang. Somewhere a dog barked. The world continued spinning while two operators decided the shape of justice. Grayson extended his hands for cuffs. For what it's worth, Commander, you were the best leader I ever served under. I'm sorry it ended this way. So am I. Evelyn walked toward the door, paused, looked back at Dalton. Colonel, how do you do it? How do you keep going when everything you trust turns out to be lies? Dalton was quiet for a long moment. The question deserved an honest answer. The kind of honesty that came from 64 years of living with choices that most people couldn't imagine making. You remember why you started? You remember the people you're protecting. You remember that for every Grayson who betrays trust, there's a Westbrook who makes impossible shots because you believed in him. He paused. And you accept that this is the life you chose. The life that chose you. And you do it again tomorrow because nobody else will. Evelyn nodded, opened the door, walked out into the corridor where her new mission waited, where justice and betrayal would collide in ways that would shape the rest of her life. Behind her, Dalton sat alone in the secure conference room, thinking about Douglas Blackthorne, about Grozny, about the promises he'd made and kept and broken, about the cost of leadership when leadership meant sending people into darkness and hoping they came back changed but not broken. The court-martial of Master Sergeant Victor Kane happened 6 months after Coronado. Military courtroom. Dress uniforms. The weight of 15 years of service balanced against one morning of choices that revealed who he truly was. The charges were read. Attempted murder of a federal officer. Conspiracy. Abuse of authority. Conduct unbecoming. Each one a nail in a coffin Kane had built himself. Evelyn testified. Professional, precise. No vindictiveness. He made choices that revealed his character, she told the court. I gave him opportunities to be better. He chose not to take them. That's character revelation, not entrapment. The defense attorney tried, argued that Evelyn had concealed her identity, that Kane's actions, while misguided, were motivated by legitimate security concerns, that 15 years of decorated service should count for something. Senior Chief Brennan testified, confirmed Kane had planned murder before verification. His voice shook, but he told the truth. Davis Murphy and Thompson testified. Young men who'd followed orders they shouldn't have followed. Guilt written across their faces like scars. Major Hartwell described the federal communications that revealed Evelyn's identity. The moment everything changed. The verdict came after 3 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The sentence followed the next day. 25 years military prison. Dishonorable discharge. Reduction to E1. Forfeiture of all pay and allowances. Everything Kane had built over 15 years destroyed in a single morning because he couldn't accept that a woman might be his equal. 3 days after the verdict, a letter arrived at Evelyn's office. Handwritten. Prison stationery. Kane's blocky script filled the single page. Commander Blackthorne. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't deserve it. But you should know something. In 15 years of teaching SEALs, I created operators who followed orders without question. Men who confused obedience with honor. Men who thought strength was about domination. You showed me the difference in 3 hours. The men I trained will be better now because you broke me. That's not redemption. That's just truth. I spent 15 years building authority on intimidation. You showed me what real leadership looks like, the kind that earns respect instead of demanding it. Whatever happens in the next 25 years, at least, I'll know I finally learned something worth knowing. I hope the men watching that morning learned it too. Victor Kane. Evelyn read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. Not forgiveness, not absolution. but acknowledgement that even broken people could choose to rebuild themselves into something better. As they led Kane from the courtroom, he paused, looked back at Evelyn one final time. I was wrong about you, about women, about what strength means. I'll spend my years understanding what you showed me. Evelyn nodded, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of potential growth. Davis Murphy and Thompson came to her office the next week. Young SEALs with old eyes, the kind of eyes that came from learning hard lessons. Commander, Davis said, we wanted to apologize. What happened in that warehouse was wrong. We should have questioned the orders. We should have recognized that something wasn't right. You were following orders from a superior you trusted? Evelyn replied. That's not a crime. It felt like one. It should. That's how you know you're still human. Murphy spoke next. Ma'am, we heard about what you did, the operation in Yemen, stopping the attack that would have killed all those people. We wanted you to know the classification on that operation doesn't permit discussion, Evelyn interrupted gently. But thank you. Thompson finally found his voice. Ma'am, we came here because we wanted you to know that we understand now what real leadership looks like, what real strength looks like. We spent years following Kane because we thought intimidation was the same as authority. You showed us the difference. And what are you going to do with that knowledge? Be better, Davis said simply. Be the kind of leaders who would never follow those orders in the first place. Evelyn stood, extended her hand to each of them in turn. Honor isn't earned back overnight. It's rebuilt one decision at a time. Be the SEALs who protect the innocent. Be the leaders who recognize when authority becomes corruption. Yes, ma'am. They filed out. 3 young men who'd made a mistake and chosen to learn from it. Not redemption, but the beginning of something better. The Navy Cross ceremony happened on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other day until it didn't. Pentagon Courtyard. 200 people in attendance. Dress uniforms and medals, and the weight of ceremony that the military used to mark moments that mattered. Admiral Morrison stood at the podium. 62 years old. 4 stars on his shoulders. The kind of man who'd spent a lifetime making decisions that determined whether nations went to war or found peace. Today, we honor Commander Evelyn Blackthorne for extraordinary heroism in action against enemy forces. Through her leadership and tactical brilliance, Commander Blackthorne conducted a surgical strike against a high-value terrorist target, personally neutralized the threat, and recovered intelligence that prevented coordinated attacks on American cities. He paused, letting the words settle over the assembled crowd. Casualty estimates for the planned attacks ranged from 80,000 to over 120,000 American lives. All prevented because 12 operators moved through darkness and made choices that most of us can't imagine making. Morrison lifted the Navy Cross. The medal caught sunlight and threw it back like a promise or a prayer. He approached Evelyn, pinned it to her chest with hands that had performed this ceremony dozens of times but never lost the weight of what it meant. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action, he said quietly. Just for her. Your father would be proud, Commander. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Thank you, sir. Speech, someone called from the crowd. Evelyn looked at the faces watching her. Officers and enlisted. Operators and support staff. People who understood what she'd done and people who never would. She thought about what to say. How to explain what couldn't be explained to people who hadn't been there. I'm not good at speeches, she began. Scattered laughter. But I'll say this. The work we do doesn't happen because of individuals. It happens because of teams. The people standing in this room. The people who couldn't be here. The people who will never be recognized for what they've sacrificed. She thought about the 7 teammates who died in Grozny. About Westbrook's impossible shot. About Grayson's betrayal and the choice to show mercy anyway. We do this work because someone has to, because the alternative is unacceptable, because there are people in this world who want to hurt innocent civilians, and the only thing standing between them and success is us. Her voice cracked slightly, rare vulnerability showing through professional composure. I wear this medal for everyone who can't wear their own, for the fallen, for the forgotten, for the ones who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. This is theirs, not mine. The applause was thunderous. Evelyn stood at attention while it washed over her, felt the weight of the medal and the weight of memory and the weight of promises that could never be fully kept but had to be honored anyway. After the ceremony, her team found her hiding behind the Pentagon, away from crowds and cameras and the weight of attention she'd never wanted. Westbrook brought beer smuggled in somehow. Brenner brought stories that made everyone laugh. Cordell brought the quiet competence that came from knowing when silence mattered more than words. To the commander, Westbrook said, raising his beer, who taught us that strength isn't about hitting hard. It's about knowing when not to hit at all. To the commander, they echoed. Evelyn raised her own beer. To the team, without you, none of this matters. They drank. Brothers in arms, family forged through fire and blood and choices that defined who they were. What's next? Brenner asked. Next we rest. Then we go back to work. There's always more work. Always, Cordell agreed. Dalton found them an hour later, 64 years old and still moving like a man who remembered what it was like to run toward gunfire instead of away from it. Commander, word? Evelyn followed him away from the group, knew before he spoke what this was about. Could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way he carried himself when bad news needed delivering. Grayson's intelligence is checking out, Dalton said. Project Prometheus is real. Bigger than we thought. The task force is greenlit. You ship out in 72 hours. Where? Everywhere. This is a global operation, Evelyn. Multiple theaters, multiple targets. You'll be hunting ghosts for the next year, maybe longer. My team, whoever you want, full operational control, presidential authorization. Rules of engagement are yours to write. Evelyn looked back at her teammates, Westbrook telling a story that made Brenner snort beer through his nose. Cordell laughing quietly. Men who'd followed her into hell and come out the other side. I want them. All of them. Done. Brief them tonight. Movement begins tomorrow. Dalton started to walk away. Paused. Looked back. For what it's worth, your father would be proud. I know I am. Colonel, you've become the leader he knew you could be, the kind who makes impossible choices and lives with the consequences, the kind who shows mercy when it's deserved and justice when it's required. That's rare. Don't lose it. I'll try. That's all any of us can do. 6 months later, the memorial wall in the classified facility received a new name. Captain Douglas Blackthorne joined the hundreds of others who'd given everything in service to operations that would never be acknowledged. Evelyn stood before the wall with Westbrook beside her and Dalton behind her. The weight of memory heavy enough to crush, but somehow bearable when shared. I kept my promise, she said quietly, to the names carved in stone. Volkov is in prison. The attack was stopped. The people he was working with are being hunted. The wall didn't answer. It never did. What happens now? Westbrook asked. Now we hunt the next threat. And after that, the one after. That's what we do. We stand watch so others don't have to. Forever. Until there's nobody left to protect or nobody left to hunt. Whichever comes first. Dalton placed a hand on her shoulder, the same gesture Grayson had used in Yemen. But this touch carried different weight. This was family. This was trust that had been earned and tested and proven. Your father would be proud, Commander. Hell, I'm proud. Are you? I let Grayson compromise 3 years of operations. I trusted someone who was using me the entire time. You're human. That's not weakness. That's the price of being the kind of leader who inspires loyalty. If you'd been suspicious of everyone, you'd have caught Grayson sooner. But you also wouldn't have earned Westbrook's trust. Or mine. Or your team's. The balance is what makes you dangerous to our enemies. Evelyn thought about that. About trust and betrayal. About loyalty and duty. About the weight of command and the cost of believing in people. She turned away from the memorial wall, walked toward the exit where new missions waited, new threats, new choices between justice and revenge, and whatever word made her feel better about the things she did in darkness. Westbrook and Dalton followed. 3 generations of warriors, 3 people who understood that wars weren't won on battlefields. They were won in moments like the one in Volkov's compound, when operators made choices that defined who they were and what they stood for. The door closed behind them. The memorial wall stood silent. 7 names carved in stone. Douglas Blackthorne among them. 7 people who would never grow old, never see their children graduate, never know that their sacrifice mattered. But it did matter. Every day it mattered. Every operation that succeeded. Every American life saved. Every threat neutralized before it metastasized into tragedy. That was the promise the Quiet Ones made, to stand in darkness and push back, to carry weight that would crush lesser people, to do violence on behalf of those who couldn't or wouldn't, to be monsters so others didn't have to be. And Commander Evelyn Blackthorne would keep that promise. For her father. For her team. For the 100,000 Americans whose names she'd never know, but whose lives she'd saved. Tomorrow she would lead her team against Project Prometheus. Tomorrow she would face new enemies and make new choices about justice. Tomorrow she would prove again that the Quiet Ones were the most dangerous. But tonight she would remember her father's voice, his lessons, his sacrifice. She would remember that strength had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with determination. She would remember that the best revenge was living well and fighting hard and never giving the bastards the satisfaction of breaking you. She walked out of the building into Washington, D.C. twilight. The city stretched before her. Millions of people living their lives, going to work, raising families, sleeping safe because people like her stood watch in darkness. Never judge the Quiet Ones. They might be carrying the weight of the world. And they're just getting started. The war wasn't over. It would never be over. But as long as there were people willing to stand in the darkness and hold the line, the light would survive. Commander Evelyn Blackthorne was one of those people. And her story was far from finished.